Hi, David. It's great to be able to meet with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're the alternative transportation coordinator for the City of Carmel, Indiana.
Correct.
What does that mean? Because I'm sure people scratch their heads
Sure.
a little bit.
My primary focus for the city is basically bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and projects. But I am involved in almost every aspect of transportation here at the city. But like I said, I focus on bicycle and pedestrian projects. Carmel started this position, it was in 2005, I believe. And at that time, it wasn't necessarily very common, especially in Indiana. But since then, more and more communities in Indiana are starting to have positions like this. I know Bloomington has had one, and Indianapolis has one as well. I believe Fort Wayne and some other cities do as well.
In the city, there is the development of the Carmel Access Bikeway system.
Mm-hmm.
Whose idea was it, and how did it happen?
Sure. There's a group of people who like to discuss different biking potential projects and things like that here at the city. And the idea kind of came because the Monon is definitely our most popular piece of bike infrastructure in the city. And I think a lot of people, and we thought a lot of people, only recognize that as a place to bike in Carmel, but there are a lot of other places throughout the city for biking. And so we kind of took on the project to identify places where the city could recommend as safe for biking. And then from that, we identified 5 loops that are more designed for recreation, where you can start and finish your bike ride by following signs from the same location. Those loops are kind of spread out through the city, and they kind of show the different areas in the city that Carmel has to offer. You can kind of tell where the loops are just by their name. We have the White River Loop, which is on the east side by the White River, then the Cool Creek Loop, the City Center Loop, the Village Loop, and the West Loop. So they kind of just show off all the different amenities and areas that Carmel has, and it's a mix of what we kind of feel are safe streets to ride on, so more local streets to ride, but then our MultiUse Path network and some of our Greenways as well.
Great.
And then it also has, as part of it, what we call express routes, and those are linear routes, more designed for commuting. It has 8 routes, 2 of which are east-west routes, and 6 that are north-south routes. And so if you look at a cab map, which are on bikecarmel.com, you can kind of try to identify some routes that you can take to get from one place to another by using the cab routes.
So what was your methodology to draw those lines on the maps for the loops? Yeah,
Sure.
like your criteria
We wanted
of
to
choosing things.
Yeah, we wanted to identify more local streets, streets that kind of have lower speed limits, maybe aren't as high volume, and then have wide enough right of way so that cars and bikes can safely share the roadway. So a lot of those go through local neighborhoods. We did have to go on more collector streets every once in a while to get from one neighborhood to another. But I think when we were working on it, it was kind of easy to identify which streets those were. And some people had been thinking about this for a long time. So it was kind of easy to identify those. Once we started getting into the whole project, it started getting a lot more detailed about where the different identification signs should be located, as far as how we can co-locate 2 route signs or a loop sign with a route sign. And then the cab system basically has signs that are next to the road, and then inlays which are in the road or on a multi-use path with an arrow indicating the direction that you're supposed to follow. So once we got into the details, it was a little bit more difficult, but we were able to get it done and show people how to get around without having to carry a map or having them to reference that map all the time.
How important are recreation loops compared to the transportation loops?
The transportation routes, I think, were a very important thing. just because it shows how you can get from one place to another. And you can use, if you look at the map before, you can figure out ways to use the recommended routes or the loops and interconnect those to get from one place to another. But we realize a lot of people do like to bike for recreation. And so the idea of having them in a circuitous loop made it so that if they drove to the beginning spot, they could take their bike off their car and then ride back to their car basically and then go home. We also tried to vary the distances of each loop. So they range from I think 9 miles maybe to about 14 or 15 miles. So depending on how far you want to ride, you could pick a loop versus another one, and some are more family friendly than others because of the distances and the streets that are being used. But
And what kind of sites or nodes along the loops influenced where you would put the loops? Meaning like a good ice cream place?
Oh,
or no?
Not necessarily that. It was
Okay.
more kind of geographic. It's like the White River. We use the White River Greenway. It's a great amenity that the city has. It's actually, as far as our Parks Department survey said, it was the now third most popular amenity in Carmel.
Great.
And so we utilize that. We utilize the Monon, obviously, because it's a big greenway. But we also wanted to show where some parks are located. We wanted to take them by schools, so if kids wanted to use them, they could ride their bikes to school. And then just some of the other amenities. I mean, in City Center, it takes people through the middle of the city, so there's a lot of amenities there. But on the West Loop, it's a lot less dense neighborhoods, a very scenic area kind of. So it does give an opportunity to have different scenery when you're riding in one versus another.
What is the difference between the multi-use path and then a greenway and then maybe a sidewalk and a bike lane?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
for different kinds of places where the bicycles are going to be.
Sure. There's a lot of different terms for different types of
Yes.
bicycling infrastructure, and some of them get mixed up when people are talking about them. A greenway is typically not within any road right-of-way. It's in its own designated area, like the Monon Trail. It's our most popular greenway. We also have the Hagen-Burke Trail, the Greyhound Trail, and the White River Greenway. And all of those are off-roadway in their own right-of-way, kind of go their own route that way. And so those are more greenways. A multi-use path is typically within a road right-of-way. So you'll see them next to our collector streets, and they run parallel to those roadways. We like those because they offer an opportunity for people to multi-uses, right? So that it offers an opportunity for people to cycle or walk or jog or rollerblade on those paths next to the roadway. A sidewalk is typically about our spec says 5 foot wide,
5 foot.
and they're typically made out of concrete. So it's a little bit different than what the multi-use path would be, and we don't necessarily recommend people ride bikes on sidewalks. It's not illegal by any means, but it's just a different option to have next to a roadway. And so in Carmel, on most of our collector roads, we put multi-use paths down. And they're typically made with asphalt, so they're smoother for people to ride or rollerblade or for strollers, things like that. Bike lanes are an on-street facility, so where the multi-use path is off of the roadway, and typically there's maybe a tree row in between the road and the multi-use path. On a bike lane, it's on the side of the roadway, and bikes will be traveling alongside the cart lanes where the cars are driving.
Because this is multi-use for pedestrians and bicyclists, and I'm sure skaters and boards, what are you experiencing conflicts between the different user groups?
We have unfortunately experienced a few conflicts at intersections where cyclists may not stop at an intersection, or a car turns into them, or unfortunately on the Monon even cyclists and pedestrians have had collisions, And that's one reason why last year we tried to initiate new bike ordinances to kind of show how to regulate, I guess, those types of uses and how they intermingle and who needs to yield to who and how to ride or walk or even drive safely.
Yeah, so tell us about this ordinance that was drafted maybe last year, and then has it passed, and what's in it?
Yeah, it was drafted. Really, it was drafted in the late summer or late winter, early spring of 2013,
Okay.
And it was then reviewed by our council and approved in the fall of 2013.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. So 2014 will be basically the first full bike season that these ordinances are in effect. The purpose of them wasn't necessarily to start ticketing everybody, but it was to kind of raise awareness and educate the public on safe ways to ride and safe ways to drive when a bicycle is on a roadway. The big part of it is we have the 3-foot passing law that was included on that. Indiana state law doesn't have a specific distance. It just says pass a bicycle at a safe distance. So that could be different for everybody what a safe distance really is. And so we specifically said, which a lot of other municipalities in Indiana are starting to do this as well, but that a minimum of 3 foot when passing a bicycle in a car. We also touched on how cyclists should yield to pedestrians when approaching from behind. And then we also touched on cars turning in front of bicyclists or opening their doors in an unsafe manner, just different things like that. It definitely creates more of a safer atmosphere if people abide by all the rules. And so now that they're in effect, we're hoping to educate the public about them so that people are aware that these are situations that could cause dangerous issues.
Tell us what the fines are, that in the event that a ticket is given.
I'm not actually sure what the fines were decided on, so that's a difficult one to answer. But like I said, I don't think this was necessarily a revenue-generating ordinance.
Yeah.
The primary effort of those were to basically educate the public and help make it safe. I know our police department is planning on trying to educate the public at least at the beginning of the bike season, and I don't believe they're planning on issuing tickets right away, but they will issue warnings for instances where they're extremely deviating from what was approved.
So how are you going to educate for the new ordinance?
Well,
are you doing anything?
We're doing videos like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing that we're hoping to do. Like I said, the police department have said that they always go into an education time frame where they try to educate the public. We're hoping to do some news releases. Every year we host a Bike to Work Day. We're going to spread the word that way with some handouts. We have information on our webpage currently. And then last year when the ordinances were being reviewed by council, there was a lot of media coverage on it in the newspaper and even on TV channels, things like that. So we're hoping to continue that. To be honest, I started analyzing accidents or collisions that involved bicycles from 2012 versus 2013. And in 2012, there were just about twice as many as there were in 2013. So I think just getting out the awareness has helped to lower those collision incidents, at least here in Carmel.
So what's next? It looks like you've got a wonderful system. So what's next that you need to do?
Well, we're always trying to improve our infrastructure and our cab networks and just the overall experience of riding or walking in Carmel. We have a few projects that are MultiUse Path projects that we're hoping to implement or construct towards the end of this year that will be open by next year. One is along 106th Street from Ditch to Illinois, and that will provide a full connection basically from Pennsylvania all the way into downtown Zionsville. And then the ultimate goal is to have it go all the way across Clay Township And currently there's a path from the Hamilton County line to what will then be Pennsylvania Parkway. And then we have from College all the way to the White River. So there'll just be a small gap there. Another project that we're working on is a multi-use path from just about Keystone to Gray Road on on Main Street. And that will be to replace an existing boardwalk that's kind of a little dilapidated, and it always requires maintenance every year. So a new multi-use path will definitely help with the accessibility and the ability for people to ride or walk on that in a safe way. And then the other project that we're working on is 136th Street from Keystone to Gray. And that project will be a multi-use path project. It will fill a gap of missing sidewalk and allow people to walk safe to football games, because our high school football stadium's there, or to the high school there. But it'll also be a great connection into our Greenway system, because it will connect to our Greyhound Trail, which also connects to the Hagen-Burke Trail, and then that connects to the Monon Trail and the 146th Street path. So that's another good one. When the 106th Street path is complete, we're hoping to make that another linear route for our cab system. And then we have also been considering adding another recreation loop in the cab system. We're working to, actually early this year, to implement a few bike fix stations and public bike pumps. We're going to implement our first three along the Monon, one at each trailhead here in Carmel, and then one in Central Park, all along the Monon.
Great.
We have another public bike pump on a bike rack that is along Main Street. So if you're low on air, you will be hopefully less than a mile away from a public bike pump there. We're looking into the possibility of starting a bike share program that could hopefully link into Indianapolis's and promote biking in that way. And then, like with the ordinances, and as we expand our system and the path network and all of that, we're hoping to help continue to promote education and safety with bicycling in the community.
So you have your plans in the loops in Carmel, but they're beyond Carmel. How do you plan to connect to the other cities around?
We have tried to work with some of our neighboring communities, and we have been able to make a few connections. I mentioned earlier the 106th Street connection that goes from Hamilton County to the Boone County line and then into Zionsville. We've worked a little bit with them to try and identify maybe some other east-west connections. We've worked with Westfield on connections. Our Hagen-Burke Trail connects into their Cool Creek Trail.
Okay.
And the Monon obviously goes up into Westfield. We just, Hamilton County was recently able to complete a bridge over 146th Street, so it's a smooth transition from Carmel into Westfield using the Monon in that way. And then one of our cab loops, the West Loop, actually goes into Westfield and then back down into Carmel as well. And then we've tried to work with Fishers on a few different projects for connectivity, and we try and keep our neighbors kind of in the know as to what we're doing for those connections. I know the Hamilton County is interested in opportunities for bike tourism and things like that.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about tourism into the different communities within Hamilton County, connectivity definitely plays a big part in that. And then we're always, trying to look for other ways to connect with our neighbors. And so it's just another way to try and promote riding, because we realize Carmel isn't a city sitting like an island by itself. We do have to connect to our neighbors to promote safe riding in the central Indiana region.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure hearing about all of these wonderful improvements in Carmel, and it seems like you've set a really high standard. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
For bike education and bike use in a city. So I look forward to seeing more great things from Carmel to lead the way.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.